Yo, Alex here. It might seem a bit strange for me to buy an iPhone 14 Plus in 2023. 60Hz display, not a ton of camera upgrades, and an A15 chipset from late 2021. But while it was on discount and I was curious about how it would perform in Genshin, so I bought one to try out. After spending some time with it, I dig it. First of all, while the design is technically not as premium, I like it way more than the 14 Pro Max. The matte sides doesn't collect fingerprints and feels nicer to touch, the more subdued camera bump looks cleaner to me, I love the color options, especially this blue one, and most importantly, it's a lot lighter compared to other big screen iPhones in recent years. The last point alone makes it a huge deal for me, considering that even the S23 Ultra was already way too heavy for my taste. I also like the flatter design and screen. It's nice to have an IP68 rating, and well, that's about it actually. While it does have wireless charging and MagSafe, I don't really like using those. While it has stereo speakers, they sound pretty average. While I like the Lightning port's design, it's still only USB 2.0 and all my other devices are using USB-C. While the screen has nice brightness and colors, it's only 60Hz and there is no high-frequency PWM dimming or DC dimming. Though on this last point, I do want to note that I'm still not that particular about having 120Hz since most of the things I'm doing on my phone don't need that high of a refresh rate, and I'm also not very sensitive when it comes to lower brightness PWM flickering. But it is definitely still worth a complaint or two since the phone ain't exactly cheap. In the past, I would have complained about not having a fingerprint sensor as well, but Face ID with mask actually works pretty reliably for me, so I'm going to give it a pass. Oh, and it doesn't have dynamic island as well, but I consider that a good thing since I find it more distracting than a notch. Anyway, let's talk about performance. Part of the reason I bought this phone despite the older chipset is that I know from the iPad mini 6 that the A15 can handle Genshin really well, and the bottleneck is pretty much heat dissipation. So I was curious about whether the bigger size of the phone, plus the newer internal design for better thermals, will make the game run well enough for me. Because while the OnePlus 11 runs Genshin really well, the Android version of the game doesn't support controller input, which is my preferred way of playing the game at home. So if the iPhone 14 Plus could run the game well enough, I would seriously consider switching over to it as my main device. And while it sort of is, I still think the OnePlus 11 handles the game better, especially thermals, since the 14 Plus will start dropping the frame rate fairly quickly during my usual tests. However, do keep in mind that Genshin for iPhones usually has a slightly higher render resolution, and they have higher graphics options for visual effects, so that might be a factor as well. But I do want to mention that if I just turn on a small USB-powered fan, that alone will be enough to keep the phone cool and run the game smoothly no matter what I throw at it, which is still quite impressive considering the higher graphics. This is why I still feel like I can say it runs the game well enough, since this is how I would actually be playing the game. Since it supports controller input, it will be propped up on a stand in front of the small USB fan that I usually use to keep myself cool. Battery consumption for Genshin is actually quite impressive. Despite the higher graphics and smaller battery size, it seems to consume less battery compared to other Android devices I've tested. So yeah, while it does require a bit of help when it comes to cooling, the Genshin experience I can get from the phone is still really good in my opinion. I'm not going to talk too much about the other stuff since the phone has been out for a while now and a lot of things are sort of just as expected from an iPhone. Good performance for everyday tasks, camera performance for photo taking is just okay, video capture is still ahead of most other Android phones, and iOS is still, well, iOS. Though I do want to mention how much I appreciate the shortcuts feature for Genshin. I can just set up a one-tap shortcut to open the game and turn on Bluetooth for the controller, which is super convenient. All in all, when looking at what the phone is lacking and the price of the phone, it's tempting to just say that the phone isn't great value for money. After all, the 14 Pro Max does offer a lot more features and hardware for just 300 Singapore dollars more. Not to mention as well that the 256GB iPhone 14 Plus costs about the same as a brand new Galaxy S23 Ultra at this point in time, and there is the OnePlus 11 which is noticeably cheaper. But I personally feel like it might not be that bad, because the phone does offer something I want that I can't get from an Android device, which is controller support for Genshin, and it also has something that other recent iPhones can't offer, which is having a big screen while not being too heavy. You'll have to go as far back as the iPhone 8 Plus to find a big iPhone around this weight. While I know that weight probably isn't a deal breaker for a lot of folks, looking at all the news about underwhelming sales for the phone, it is a deal breaker for me. So as someone who wants a bigger screen these days but doesn't want something too heavy, this alone makes it one of my favorite iPhones in recent years, and pretty much the only iPhone that I would buy at this point in time. Of course, if you don't mind a heavier phone and don't want to pay iPhone 14 Pro Max money, there is the 13 Pro Max as well. But because of how good iPhone's resale value usually are, the price difference isn't actually that big. So personally, since those features are not as important to me, I would rather have the official warranty from Apple and get a new device instead. This better resale value is also another reason why I don't feel like it's that bad value even compared to the S23, because eventually when you want to upgrade your device, you're probably going to get a better price in the resale market for an iPhone. So yeah, I ended up liking the iPhone 14 Plus a lot more than I thought I would. It might not be the best value for money, might not be the best phone for everyone, and it is a very boring phone, but it does fit my needs and preferences well. And if you have the same needs and preferences as I do, or you just want a big iPhone that is brand new but still not too expensive, the iPhone 14 Plus might be the phone for you.